Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Ben Wilder, Director of the Desert Laboratory here on Tumamoc Hill with the University of Arizona. I am grateful to be speaking to you tonight from Tumamoc Hill, known in O'odham as Chumamagi Duag, Horned Lizard Mountain, on the ancestral lands of the Savaipuri and Tohono O'odham peoples. This volcanic hill is of prominent ancestral, cultural, and sacred significance to the O'odham nations, including the Tohono O'odham Nation, Gila River Indian Community, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, the Ak-Chin Indian Community, as well as the Hopi tribe and the Pasquayaqui tribe. The Desert Laboratory recognizes the cultural significance of Tumamoc Duag as the bedrock of our institution and our future actions. It's great to have you joining us for this last installment in what has been a really remarkable lecture series this fall, Tumamoc Hill, Health, Community, and Nature in a New Era. This series has really been intended to help us reflect on this time of uncertainty and continuous change, and also especially the role of Tumamoc Hill as an anchoring point within that, and for so many of us in this larger community who come here with frequency or occasionally. We have heard from key leaders of our community here in Tucson, Dr. Betsy Cantwell, leader of Research, Innovation, and Impact here at the University of Arizona, and Dr. Terry Cullen, director of Pima County Health Department. The importance of Tumamoc from Ned Norris Jr., chairman of the Tohono O'odham Nation, and insights into the relationship between people and the hill from the Confluence Center. Tonight, we pivot to talk about food from two of the leading culinary pioneers of their generation, chefs David Bouley and Janos Wilder. Food has been a fundamental part of the landscape of Tumamoc Hill for thousands of years. The oldest archaeological dates we have for Tumamoc are based on 2,500-year-old corn kernels from the top of the hill. There's a 1,500-year-old agave field on the western foothills of the mountain. The saguaros of the hill were undoubtedly sources for fruit harvesting by the Tohono O'odham for generations. Our region hosts dozens and dozens of food crops that are uniquely adapted to arid regions. And in fact, we have well over 50 crop wild relatives that are the sources of or related to many of the major food crops of the world today. The fertile fields at the base of the hill fed by the Santa Cruz River were tended for centuries and were the foundations of our city, Tucson. Tumamoc has played a central role in desert foods and well-being through all of this time. Tonight, we will explore the meaning and importance of food from the lens of the chef and champions of food culture. Both Janos and David have taken their passion for food and creating experiences for their guests to the highest levels of culinary artistry and are internationally recognized for their accomplishments, craft, and vision. And I hope many of you joining us have had the pleasure to eat their food. I am particularly excited for tonight's conversation as this topic is very personal for me. As Janos' son, the restaurant world was my upbringing, and the relationship to food that we're discussing tonight has really been a backdrop for me. It is really remarkable also how my interest and passion in desert ecology and science have led to a reconnection with food and arid land adaptations and the current work of my father. So how fun to be able to speak with him and our dear friend and inspiration, Chef David Bouley. David, welcome. Feel free to turn your video on at this point. Great to see you there. Thank you for joining us from New York. And you're still muted, So how we're gonna work for tonight is we're gonna have a brief presentations by David first, and then my father Janos second, and just kind of giving us intros to their approaches and how they think about the topics at hand tonight. And then we're going to get into a moderated conversation. And then all throughout this, anybody in the audience, please feel free to enter questions or comments, especially questions though, into the Q&A box. And we will get to those at the end of our evening. We do not end hard at the hour at 7 o'clock. Well, if the conversation is going well, which I expect it will be tonight, we'll go over, but certainly end by 7:30 p.m. Arizona time. So let me introduce and tell you a bit about David Bouley. He is a cookbook author, chef, and restaurateur. He worked in restaurants from an early age and was strongly influenced by life on his French grandparents' farm, drawing upon their French heritage and instilling a love of the land, an appreciation for fresh products, care in their preparation, and the inspiration to cook and enjoy healthy meals. After studying at the Sorbonne, Chef Boule had the opportunity to work with some of Europe's most acclaimed chefs, including Roger Verger, Paul Bocuse, Joe Robuchon, and more. Boule opened in 1987, rating 4 stars. Zagat rating for 8 years of 29 to 30. Boule Bakery, 4 stars. Danube, Australia, Hungarian, 3 stars. Boule 2008 awarded 2016 TripAdvisory Best in the US. Boule at Home and Boule Test Kitchen, 7 James Beard Awards, several 4-star New York Times, and several years of the highest in the Zagat Guide. Again, I hope you all have had the opportunity to visit one, if not many, of those restaurants. Chef Boule opened the Chef and the Doctor series with preventative alternatives to doctors who present for an hour with a health focus. That a chef tasting menu occurs in tandem with the doctor's particular health initiative to demonstrate the service of food from a health point. A very innovative series. Accomplishing a lifetime achievement, Chef Boule received from Columbia University and Cornell University honorary PhD degrees, as well as from the University of Connecticut and commencement speaker in 2018. He was named the Goodwill Ambassador for the Japanese government, I believe the only non-Japanese citizen to receive that, and a Chevalier of Alimentation and Agriculture Legion of Honor from the French government. David, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that we could join. You know, it's certainly exciting to be this involved in this new relationship through technology. You know, as a chef, I always like to be together and share the aromatics and the central fun of what we do. But I'm very excited about learning more about your program, how possibly we could work together, and some of the possibilities in terms of the relationships that we've had all these years, in terms of how we integrate what we would say chef ingredients or artisanally prepared ingredients into mainstream, make it more accessible. And how do we get folks to understand that they can do things quickly in their kitchen and not have intimidation? How do we build the confidence through skill and technique? And how do we sort of augment their kitchens with health benefits? So how does really food service them? What's the real function of food beyond taste and taking care of hunger when we need to eat? So how do we, there's a matrix out there now that's getting stronger and stronger. I feel though that we're more and more fragmented than we've ever been. So we need to build these communities. We need to all work together and unify some of our passions, some of our efforts, and contribute to communities. The community could be the family. The community could be a group of people that we work with. It could be our religion. It could be whatever, our golf course, you know, whatever, our baseball team. But we all have to build on our own relationships and also understand that the best way to get really strong and unbreakable is through these lessons that other people might have gone through and had won over the battle of staying healthy and enjoying life. So how do we build those into each one of our lives? We're all individuals. We all need individual care. Certainly individual medicine is growing quickly. Stop generalizing foods, clear up the myths of food, which there are so many myths outside. Who do we listen to? Who should we listen to? And how do we listen to our own bodies? And basically those experiences as we get stronger that we could share with our friends, our family, and build on. So hopefully, you know, I spend some time out there with you folks. I really admire what you're doing because having lived in Europe, growing up here, I have a French citizenship, but a lot of my family in France are either in the medical field, holistic doctor, or or somehow related to food. So we always felt that when I came back stateside, that there was always a little bit of confusion, the gap or the gulf to cross between health world and the food world. And I really feel that we need to pull that gulf closer together. The food world needs to know more about the health world. The health world needs to know more about the food world. And I'm sure that you folks are accomplishing quite a lot of those values. So I'm very excited to understand how, a chef back east can help build on our knowledge, particularly what we've been learning in Japan. We just completed a few years ago an NHK. NHK is the Japanese government media center. It's like a BBC. We did a 3-year documentary. We started in Okinawa and we went all the way up to Hokkaido, the island north of Japan. And we started in an area where we were with, it's all based on longevity. Why are these folks living so old? Why are there 20,000 people over 100 years old in Okinawa? And why is Nagano, a northern prefecture, beating the Okinawans? What exactly did they do? They were listed as one of the unhealthy prefectures. Now they're the superior blue zone. And some of the areas that we were taught we could discuss or share. We've been bringing lots of things stateside in terms of knowledge. I even brought a biochemist from Nagano, and we did a collaboration at Cornell University with fermentation. And it was quite shocking for the food scientists and PhDs up there to learn what this biochemist his entire life has been on. So we'd love to, continue to learn, share, build relationships, and how do we integrate the products that we have available? How do we educate the consumer that stop generalizing foods? They're not all the same. We cannot consider certain foods to be the same as others. So how do we educate, and how do we build people's confidence, curiosity? And I find that a lot of the young people, we just did a bento box event a few months ago. We have a pretty big garden here down in Battery Park, Manhattan. If you close your eyes and turn the opposite direction, you think you're up in the Hudson Valley. So we did bento boxes for high schools, and how these students responded to the flavors and taste was really compelling. And I believe that the young people will talk more, have an opportunity now to pull things together. They certainly have knowledge. It seems that it's a natural evolution for them to be considering more about what they eat and what kind of lifestyle. It's almost something that each one of these high school students seem to demonstrate was very important to them. More than anything else was their lifestyle and how they ate beyond their career. The career came after. So there's a lot of good things happening. We've got to pull a lot of people together, unify, and get strong. So I think that's kind of where I am now. We'll talk a little bit more later about what I'm doing and how hopefully we can merge together.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's fantastic. At this point, I will now bring on and introduce my father, Janos Wilder, a James Beard award-winning chef and restaurateur. Janos Wilder is one of the premier culinary experts in Tucson and the greater Western US. After earning a BA degree in political science from the University of California, Berkeley in 1976, Janos traveled to Bordeaux, France, where he studied techniques in French classical and nouvelle cuisine and learned an appreciation for the relationship between the French chef and their suppliers. The utilization of plants native to the region is tantamount to the French cooking ideal. Janos has developed this relationship here in Tucson, utilizing his knowledge of the local gardens and ingredients of the Southwest. This knowledge influenced the opening menu of Janos on the grounds of the Tucson Museum of Art in 1983. Since then, he has run Janos both downtown and then at the Westin La Paloma, J-Bar, Downtown Kitchen and Cocktails, and currently the Carriage House. Dad, welcome. Please feel free to turn your video on and unmute yourself. Fantastic.
Ben, thanks so much for having me. David, great to have you on this show as well. It's, we circle each other for a lot of years and have been eating your food for so many years and had the opportunity to see you in Tucson and show you around a little bit. So welcome to you as well. Just delighted to have you on this with us. And Ben, thanks for inviting both of us. This is a great program that you've created, Ben, and the series has been wonderful, and glad to be on it with all of you. So my interest in food and really local foods, sort of a little brief history, really started from a very practical perspective. In the mountains of Gold Hill, Colorado, as a young man, a little tiny town of 125 people, where I was the chef at a not so small restaurant. Getting products was a big deal. We were up steep dirt roads. Nobody liked to come deliver to us, and we began to really realize that some of the best things that we could possibly put on the menu were the things closest to us, whether that be trout that were brought to us by local fishermen, mushrooms foraged, or things that people were growing in the summers in their gardens, and all of those things found their way on to our menus there. From Gold Hill, I went to France to work in Bordeaux. My first love was always French cooking, and had a chance to work in Bordeaux. And in Bordeaux, we would go to the marketplace every single day. And the chefs that I worked with have developed relationships with every one of the markets, the folks that they got their fish from, their meat, the dairy, the bread, all of the vegetables. And those relationships and the foods that they brought back with them to the restaurant would be featured on that evening's menus. And so we really wrote those menus based on what was available, what was fresh, what was best, and on a daily basis. And fast forward to coming to Tucson, my understanding about the heart and soul of French cuisine wasn't really what I expected to be, although I had notebooks full of recipes and anecdotes about working in the kitchen there and techniques and all of that. That was super important to me. But really, what I learned was the heart and soul of French cooking was the relationship between the chef and his suppliers, and getting the best product that the chef could bring to his guests was the most important thing. So sort of reinforced the little bit that we were doing in Colorado, and when we came to Tucson, that became sort of an underpinning in what we wanted to do. And so we really started, and some of you know this story, started advertising for gardeners before we advertised for staff back in the early 80s. We opened in 1983, the first restaurant at the grounds of the Museum of Art, and really tried to inform our food with ingredients from the region. But really, that became sort of a journey for me, because being new to this area, I didn't really know that things always had grown here. I didn't know about the 4,000 to 5,000 year history that we had. I knew that I wanted baby vegetables that I was working with in France, and I wanted to have little turnips, and I wanted to have fresh herbs, and I wanted to have tomatoes that tasted like tomatoes. I didn't know that I wanted to have choya buds that I could pickle, or prickly pears that I could juice, or tepary beans because they were so arid and had such great nutty flavor. I was interested not what had grown here, but what could grow here. Slowly, the dawning of awareness came, and I got to see outside the four walls of my kitchen a little bit, and to find out really what had grown here. And I began to look at those and integrate those items into our menus very early on. And then started to take a deep dive into what were the flavor profiles of the region. And so as we moved farther in this direction, we moved a little further away from French food, although technique driven was for a long time, and still in many ways driven by those techniques I learned in Bordeaux, but really informed by the flavors and ingredients of the region. And then we began to identify what I call the cultural icons of the region. What are the dishes of this region that in themselves begin to identify and define the foods of the region? And so we took a deep dive into those and sort of we've started to reverse engineer things like a chili relleno and understand really what was that in its ideal type and how to create the ideal type. How do you treat the chili in itself? How do you peel it? How do you make sure that it stays fresh and alive and the colors are vital and the flavors are really pertinent and flavor forward? And that my notion wasn't, I was interested in what people were cooking and what those icons were, but I was really interested in how those ingredients could be applied to the future and what became the cutting edge for cooking at that time, almost 40 years ago. And that sort of continues to this day. And so we look at that, and then in an area that has such a long history, almost 5,000 years of agricultural history, we think about the communities and the families that have come here generation after generation to the banks of the Santa Cruz River. And that leads you to think a lot about community. And that's something that came natural to me, thinking about community, because it was something that I learned from my mother, who started me at a really young age, taking me out of school for civil rights marches and getting involved in politics and really thinking and caring about the community as a whole, not just my insular community. Well, in Tucson, that means a lot of different things. And so one of the things it means is being part of a community and giving back and giving back to a community. That's always been an important piece, but the healthfulness of the community as well. I'm always been conscious, and David, I know is the same way, that by and large, and really particularly when we had Janos for 30 years, we were really catering to an elite sort of diner. The menus were expensive, the foods were rarefied, and the experience was meant to be of the highest order. At the same time, you have to look at more and look at the entire community. And so we started finding ways to reinforce that larger community by working in a variety of different ways within the community. And one of the more recent projects, since we opened the Carriage House about 6 years ago, was a partnership with the Tucson Medical Center. And really, the idea of that was how to teach patients what a variety of different issues that they were working with, how to gear the food that they ate to the conditions that they had in a helpful way. How could the food that they were eating make them healthier? And from a chef's perspective, the first thing you have to do is be able to cook food that tastes great. And then it has to be food that people are going to be able to make easily at home and take pleasure in making. And so that food always, from a chef's perspective, needs to be a pleasurable experience, needs to taste great, and you have to be able to have a lot of fun making it. So we give countless classes on that. So that piece of it, super important. The other piece of it, another piece of it is sort of an understanding that here in Southern Arizona and Native communities around the country, that a modern diet that's been fed by surplus foods has changed the health of those communities. And to start getting back to the native foods that they were eating, learning to teach people how to cook those in a way that's delicious, but also has the healthy attributes of those foods is something that's also become important to me. And so that sort of community building around food starts becoming a pivot point for me, more than the cooking in the restaurants, but really looking at the greater community as a whole and what we can contribute to that.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So David, at this point, please join us with video and your audio back on. All right. So I'm going to kick us off here with some questions. To start, the restaurant industry has been one of the most impacted by the pandemic. And I know for each of you has brought fundamental changes and shifts to your business. I'm curious if it has also prompted you to reevaluate the relationship and conversation around food you're looking to have with your guests and your audiences. Where are you looking to put your emphasis as you create your next chapter? David, in the intro for you, I referenced the Chef and the Doctor lecture series. I think you started in 2013. Is that a line of creation that's even more front and center for you now? Or I'm very curious, where are you orienting yourself at this point in time?
Well, the room that you're looking at right now is set up as a studio. Because when I was speaking to your dad at the beginning of all this crises, I was saying, it's been 51 years I've been in the kitchen and 35 years in business. And I was kind of thinking I can't do everything I want to do if I stay in the restaurant business. So I was looking for an exit. And it worked out pretty well that I could put all my energy into something I started called Chef and Doctor series. And at that time, I developed this physical space here, which is going to be a virtual learning center, club membership. We have about 100 doctors who will be with us, and they'll have conversation and dialogue. After, and this will be for children, families, the entire community at home, and many, many other locations, some corporate management teams. A lot of folks are interested in how they can perform better through food and, of course, lifestyle. But what we're looking at right now is to develop this relationship with people in their home. So just to give an example of how, so 1985, I opened a restaurant called Montrachet, then opened Bouley. At that time, there wasn't a lot of tasting menus here in New York, but I had been trained in France in the Nouvelle Cuisine. And the French tasting menu, the Degustation menu, was very popular. Those chefs who were from France that went to Japan in the 60s were exposed to something called the Kaiseki. The Kaiseki Menu is a series of tastes, and it's all around how our microbiome and our physiology functions. Basically, we start with certain kinds of foods that energize our enzymes in our stomach for digestion, particularly raw vegetables, things like this. And then we heat the body, we cool the body, even things like when there is a tempura or a fry. After that is the vinegar dish for digestion. We finish with a carbohydrate. So how this Kaiseki menu functions is mostly the skill of the chef and the talent of the chef, but everybody's using the same products. So you go to Kyoto, you eat a Kaiseki menu in 4 different restaurants, you're going to be in there, and bamboo sprout season, everybody's cooking bamboo with a different recipe completely. You love all of them. Because a lot of chefs in Europe are always asking the Japanese chefs, please tell me what is the Kaiseki? And it's basically stay in season, follow how our physiology functions, basically how we digest food and how we appreciate food. From the beginning, we smell to taste. Even the Japanese believe smell and taste is also instructing the lower part of our bodies to get prepared because this is coming, that's coming. Certain enzymes or acids are all activated. The whole body is going to be communicating. So there's a lot of responsibility in how that works. So over the years, the menu became very exciting, and a lot of things that were coming to me were in £1 or £2. And I'm down in Wall Street. So before 9/11, all the banks were here, and many times bankers would come and close dinners. And 3 or 4 times a week, we had folks from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. We knew the principals. We knew what they like to eat. We knew a lot about them. We had detailed files on them. And however, they would come with folks that they never really had dinner with. They've been in business for a while. So how we focus on taking care of those people that just didn't have maybe the exposure or the interest to eat like these what we call the food person that came and celebrated us on a regular basis. we had to do a lot of spontaneous things. And the principal is watching our efforts to make those 5 people and him, a table of 6, just as happy as he is, but we know what he likes to eat. So a lot of times he would trust us because then he wouldn't be taking them to a steakhouse for a closing dinner. He would bring them to us because he knew that we would put this extra effort. So we're cooking sometimes his menu and 5 other menus. So not a lot of chefs would have done that in those days. They would have said, here's the tasting menu. Sure, we can make a few adjustments. So you can imagine over the period of time, we would get into what was called deconstruction, taking all the chefs' foods that had trained me, or even back in history, how were certain things made, what was important, deconstructing it so that we could rebuild it in service, because we feed a lot of people, and would it be just as good as we made it for 4 people, or you'd make something at home. And with that, a lot of building blocks came. So there's an incredible amount of things that we had available to execute meals really quickly so that we could address those 5 other palettes. Our goal is to get people to realize that their lifestyle is probably a bit crowded already. Some people are cooking their meal with a baby holding on, or they've got a call working and they're making. So people are busy. How do we get them to realize that they can still cook really well with limited skill and technique once they organize their kitchen and execute these meals quickly? Because in tasting menus, you're sending food out every 5 or 6 minutes. In those days, the menus were 16, 18 courses. Some restaurants are doing that today, smaller portions. But how do we get people to realize they have huge potential in their kitchen? They can have a lot of fun and they can do it with their family. That's pretty much our goal now. And then augment it with the health industry. How do we quantify foods and how do we build on different kinds of health challenges at home? When I was in the early parts of the Chef and Doctor series, I thought it would be difficult to get the doctors to come in and talk about health, because a lot of them said, David, I had 24 hours of nutrition. That was all they gave us. I don't really know a lot about food. We can talk a lot about science, but they all came. And I remember one time there was a lady from Harvard. She didn't have an appointment, but she had lunch, and my staff says, Lee wants to talk to you. So I went and sat with her. And she said, hi, my family is from India, but I was born in Massachusetts. I'm a professor at Harvard. I also went to culinary school. I went to culinary school so I could go into people's homes and teach them how to cook and help them get healthier. And she had about 6 inches of paper, and she pushed it forward to me. And she said, this is my evidence. She said, I think I could be a good candidate for your program. So suddenly I'm like thinking, well, I can't get any doctors to come. And then I have a lot of people volunteering the evidence that they have in their practice, either as a doctor in practice or in a medical center or academic, and they want to come in and share what they have accomplished. So my path, because I think your question is through COVID, what did we learn? I repositioned myself, and that's what I learned. And I learned that as fragmented as everything is, we can pull an incredible amount of things together and really help folks going forward. So we've been doing this now. And then in my corporate events, some people will say, well, you're never gonna get me to cook. I can't cook at home. I actually volunteered on several occasions to go into these homes and cook with these people. And it was amazing. You would think I turned on a firestorm. There's cooking now, they're sharing. I get still texts and emails about what they're doing. And these were people that I remember one time I went in, the lady, I used to cook in their homes, and the people in the home said, are you going to use the oven tonight? I said, yes, definitely. Well, we'll turn it on then, because the last time they lit it was 4 years ago when you were here last. So how do we get to the folks? Because there's intimidation. They think that they can't afford it. They don't have the skill. They think what they're going to make, they're not going to like. Lots of reasons have generated why they're not enjoying their kitchen, both from the pleasure of cooking and the health benefits, of course, the taste and the health benefits. And again, these have to be, we got to stop generalizing. I think that the only thing I've learned in 12 years of chef and doctors in terms of how do we suggest folks who might want to lose weight or do this or that is tell them, try fasting. Because that's probably the only thing that we could make a generalization out there in terms of how to help folks is try fasting. Eat in a smaller margin of time. And outside of that, every diet program or every other sort of popularity is dysfunctional when it comes to a broad group of folks. So we want to energize their homes, energize their confidence, and empower them to get to a point where they're going to say, God, why wasn't I doing this before? This is so much fun. I've got my family and everybody thinks I'm a genius. So, we've got to get them to have that kind of excitement. And I'm sure Janos and I are in a team where, I never thought I'd be a chef. I studied business in school and I studied art in France. But, it's just that the generosity of our passion and reaping the rewards, or just listening to folks, have made us stay in our careers and continue to try to reach people and do it better. Because it's just, it's so easy for us once we start to figure out how to make the folks, make food so the folks enjoy it. Well, that's so contagious. It just makes us want to know more and keep going. So my program today that I came out of COVID is that we want to learn more. Who are our partners in the health world? I work out with you. I work somewhat with Dr. Andy Wild, actually the other day. I had to do a lecture in San Diego for Columbia University. There was a bunch of 15,000 psychiatrists, and it was the first time they had a chef cook come to one of these presentations. I was talking to the dean, and when I turned around, my room was so full. There were people sitting on the carpet all around the walls. I could see the 4 doors open and close in the back. There were so many people queued up. No one would try to get in. And I was like, my goodness, they don't possibly know me out here in San Diego. But it wasn't about me, it was about the jacket. Why is there a cook here? And what am I going to learn for this? So I did a quick, easy thing, which anybody could do. I went to the health food store, which I go 3 times a week. I bought cod liver oil with lemon scent in it. I bought chlorella and spirulina. I bought pumpkin seed butter and apple cider vinegar. And so, if we make a French vinaigrette, we start with the mustard, we put the vinegar, maybe some juice from a garlic or something, and then we emulsify it with olive oil. This is a French vinaigrette. Every home makes it still today. So we put the pumpkin seed butter in a bowl, apple cider vinegar, spin that around, start emulsifying the cod liver oil inside that, and then dust some spirulina chlorella on that. And that became the most popular sauce the last 5 years. I was telling my staff, is there anyone that doesn't wipe that sauce with their finger or their bread? And this was a sauce that I thought I would never do again. And so that would be an example. You can buy 4 bottles in the store and turn that to an extremely powerful sauce that you're going to put on everything and you're going to love it. So there's no excuse why we can't put things together at home if they're that available to us. It's just connecting the dots. But Andy told me, I was cooking in his home 3 years ago or so, and we were talking about the flaxseed oil might be better than the cod liver oil, because for certain folks, and that's why we have to work with doctors as well as chefs, for certain folks, they might have too much vitamin A. So Andy's suggestion was, why don't you try doing the flaxseed oil? You're going to still get the rich omega-3, but you won't have such a density of vitamin A. So I said, this is great. A doctor that understands food. Wow, this is wonderful. So it's hard to find the doctors who have isolated components of food to that degree where we're concerning an individual's health, because we have to create food that's healthy, but everyone is different. So that's kind of what this room is all about. How do we get all these folks? I should end, but I'll add what I would like to say later on, because I don't want to monopolize on the conversation here. So yeah, it's basically coming through this COVID, looking at what's available. What do I think the future is? Where have I, developed my skill, and how can I share that? But to share synergies and how do we put together the health of people's individual concerns and their taste, and how do we almost homogenize that to one. We're the one country that has a lot of confusion about how actually we do that, but we're getting better at it. So I'm sorry I speak so long. I will cut my answers shorter a little bit. I could talk to you at the end of next week, but.
Well, I would like that. There's so much there, and David, I'm so glad that this time has given you the opportunity to transition and focus as you described in that direction. Janos, similarly for you, in addition to the Carriage House, your work as chair of the board with the Tucson City Gastronomy, is a major focus. What are you feeling is the most important space or area for you to develop in relation to food awareness?
That's kind of, we talk about pivoting, and COVID has allowed both David and me an opportunity to pivot in ways that we might not have seen before, and ways to really expand upon what we want to be doing. And one of the things that COVID taught me was that as much as I've loved the last 40 years of running restaurants and the day-to-day running restaurants and the pure joy and ecstasy that it brings to see a business humming and beautiful food and delicious food being served to our guests, and where the whole thing comes together, there's really not a lot that feels better than that. But it keeps me in an area that doesn't allow me to expand in a lot of ways. And that's one of the things that I really admire about you, David, is that even in the midst of running your restaurants, you have found the time to expand what you're doing. And that's really what I'm looking to do right now. That City of Gastronomy is a piece that's of major interest to me. It's that designation as it came to Tucson, I realized in some ways was serendipitously the culmination of my life's work of exploring the foods of this region. And so making sure and helping it shepherd that organization so that it can have the greatest impact possible here in Tucson and elsewhere as well is really important to me. So there's a lot of things that we do. It's, people begin to think that, well, City of Gastronomy, that designation is all about great restaurants. Well, we do have really good restaurants here in Tucson, but it's really what's unique about, it's about what's unique about Tucson and celebrating what's unique and using that as an economic model to drive the economy here, but also in areas of social justice and working in areas of food deserts and working in the areas of health. All of those things come together under the heading of the City of Gastronomy. So we do a tremendous amount of work in each of those areas, and that work is very important to me. We work as ambassadors. We've sent chef ambassadors around the world, sort of broadcasting what is unique about the flavors of Tucson and spreading the word around the world. We've had over $40 million worth of earned income coming in based on that designation, and certified over 35 restaurants and 15 food artisans at the very beginning of a nascent program to really start certifying restaurants and businesses. And the certification process it honors as much what it is to be a good citizen in the world, what it is for a businessman and a chef to be a citizen in the world, as it is to cook great food. How do you take care of your staff? How do you create a sustainable business where you're not just taking from the environment, but giving back to the environment? How do you address issues that are that are prominent in your community and that need to be addressing? How do we, David and me and restaurateurs here in Tucson and everywhere, become citizens of where they live and work within that? And that's a super important piece to me. There's moving forward that, David talked a lot about the healthfulness of food, and that's a piece to me that's important. I talked a bit about that earlier. We also have something else that we're looking at and all across the globe, and that's climate change and what's going to be the impact of climate change and how do we begin to adjust for that now. And, prior to being the chair of the board for Native Seed Search, for City of Gastronomy, I was on the board and chaired the board for Native Seed Search. And I always thought at that time that those seeds that were already arid adapted seeds, they were already adapted to a hot climate, to an arid climate, and used very little water, all of those things. Well, sadly, that's how much of the world is going to be. And so we here in the Seed Bank of Native Seed Search, in many ways, hold the keys to the future. We haven't realized all that fully, but the questions of how you scale those things up are super important to us. And we're just beginning that phase of it. It's also sort of getting people to understand, in a sense, and Ben, you brought me into a really wonderful program that we're working on with you and Aaron and Jonathan Keats and a number of other climate modelers to sort of dramatize what climate change is going to need. What are the foods we're going to be able to cook with here in Tucson in the next 50 or 70 years? How will those cultural culinary icons, how will we be making them? And that's a part of, by dramatizing that, we make people more aware of what the impact is going to be on their lives, other than, boy, these summers are going to be hot and it's going to be drier. But it really to sort of bring that home. So those pieces are important to me. And it's also tying that into the City of Gastronomy, where we have sister cities around the globe, and bringing that to that awareness to a much broader audience and sort of looking at it in the same way. So just as Tucson, the climate modelers tell us is going to look a lot like the middle of Australia or Pakistan and parts of Pakistan and India. Well, other places are going to look a lot like Tucson. Mm-hmm. And so how do we share our knowledge here, and how do we gain knowledge from those other places? Because when it comes down to it, we're in the business of feeding people, and there are a lot of people to feed out there.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Maybe on the heels of that, so this lecture series is in part focused on exploring ways to adapt to change and uncertainty, a lot of what you both are speaking to. As we think about that in a climate sense, here in the desert, that likely means hotter and drier. We also know that the food system across the world is straining from climate pressure and other disruptions. You mentioned it, Daddy, what models or examples are there that you two have seen that you're involved with that is addressing these concerning trends to create adaptable agriculture or food production that may be scalable? I think that may be the key ingredient here. David, I know you work a lot in Japan, but also I think partnerships with Cornell and other scientists. Are there any examples that come to mind first for you in that kind of models of scalable agriculture in a kind of climate-ready sense?
Well, I'd like to compliment, Janos on all those good values, from running a business to respecting individuals, and all the issues that we have, sustainability. I'm sure you folks are aware that we're losing a lot of our topsoil, and this is going to be more and more concern. It doesn't take too long to get on YouTube or watch some of the NASA information about what that's like. Even there's a lot of different folks that are presenting very interesting, fantastic fungi. It's really amazing what Paul Stamets has been talking about in terms of how we can maybe re-support the ground with bacteria based on the community of mushrooms, and how much healing has been going on through the mushroom kingdom. And there's a book I just finished called Eat Like a Fish. Very interesting. It's a guy that grew up in Maine, had a really rough life, jumped out of high school, the first few chapters are kind of rough, but he works in commercial fishing in Alaska, everywhere. what is he doing today? He's running a 20-acre kombu farm out here in Long Island. And he's got everybody that wants to do a movie with him. He's got Wall Street barking at him to why don't you let us invest in you? And he's just trying to hold on to his vision of how kombu, his goal is to get kombu to the center of the table. And so, yes, in the book, there's a lot of statistics that are quite shocking. You know, where we're going to be 50 years from now, how many billions of people, how are we going to feed? If we continue to deteriorate our farms and our topsoil, water is going to be an issue. So yeah, these kind of things are out there. I think a lot of the young people know about this. When I saw your seed inventory, I had been down to Lima, and I hadn't seen any of the things that you have outside of being in South America. And it's really fascinating what you're doing. As Janos was saying, certain of these products don't need a lot of water. They sustained already now into a tough environment. We're doing a bean study up at with Ray Glahn, PhD at Holly Laboratory at Cornell. So Dr. Holly won the Nobel Prize years ago as a USDA scientist. There is a laboratory there that's dedicated to his work. Grad students can do some research there with 5 or 6 PhDs, but that's where I brought a biochemist from Nagano. And we talked about a purple turnip that they've been eating for 500 years. Nagano's in the mountains. And what he did, and one of his colleagues, a very famous doctor from Tokyo, they came up, I have one here, I don't want to run over there, I'll catch it in a minute. It's a salt instrument, looks like a thermometer. You put it in your food, and you have 3 colors, a range of salt, because they were salting all their food. They were high altitude, and people couldn't get up there. So for all these years, they would salt everything, except for something called sunki, S-U-N-K-I. And that produces an extremely valuable lactic acid bacteria, which supports NAD, NHHD, and actually slow down aging, in support of all kinds of benefits for our genes. So he came and did a presentation at Cornell and shocked the professors there with the amount of B12 and things like this. They were shocked with the markers and the values of this fermented purple bean top. They eat the bottom, but they ferment the top, and they eat that and they drink the liquids. 500 years they've been doing it. But then at Cornell, they were showing also that they've been working on beans, and I've been working with them to develop a lot of recipes for beans. And as they taught me, beans grow anywhere in the world. They don't need a lot of water. They don't need a lot of support. They don't need a lot of fertilizer or pesticides or any of this. And 3 times more protein, 3 times more iron, high levels of folate, lots of polyphenols, flavonoids, a lot of stuff in good beans. And the bean that they, after studying 3,000, they got down to 3. The bean that was the most interesting was one in Africa, because over the generations, the Africans had to collect the wood that was their fuel. So it takes a lot of time and energy to collect the fuel to boil their beans. So they pollinated the bean that has smaller wall on the outside, and this bean cooked with less fuel, cooked faster. And to the surprise of everyone, it was a lower glycemic bean. And so I started to work with them, and we made pastas and gnocchi and dough, and a few people were talking about they love it, but they had a digestive issue. So I did a little bit of research, and I realized that when we go to Munich, we eat the sauerkraut. What's in the sauerkraut? Caraway. I started reading about why is caraway there. So caraway inhibits a methanol gas production. So we can metabolize the cabbage without having a digestive problem. So we started to work with a couple other compounds that would function like the caraway. And we resolved anybody having problem with the bean flour. So now this product is rolling out. Their USDA has 2 patents on how it's milled. They had to do it with air to get it so fine. They own those patents, and I see the product is starting to get to major food stores like Wegmans and Whole Foods. So that might be a path. Now, what we did about 25 years ago was, I was thinking with farmers, and in those days, mid 80s, nobody would grow anything for me. And I wanted my fingerling potato because I had worked at Robuchon in Paris and I love the puree of potato. So I met Rick Bishop, who has master degree from Cornell Agriculture, and his wife, who had a PhD in nutrition. They were the coolest people. And I went to visit them in their house upstate. Every inch of their lawn, everywhere was growing things. You had to kind of try to walk through without stepping on someone to get to the house and say, what do you guys do? So, and then they showed me a basket of fingerlings. So we got together and I gave them $40-something thousand in 3 checks. And they had to bring in a certain amount of potato to release this series of checks. So we brought Robuchon up there 3 years later with 3 writers from the New York Times. Robuchon is shocked with the enthusiasm of the farmer and willing to learn everything. And he's saying in France, we don't have that. And he loved the potatoes. Within 2 years, I ran at 20,000 pounds. And because the New York Times is writing a major story, a few years later, I see the fingerlings everywhere in the market. So we did that with about 10 different vegetables, including the roquette that you know. We used to eat the big arugula. Well, the roquette was, Rick brought that over from France and Italy. And that was another big support. So I had to pay them what they were making on their vegetables per acre exactly. So if we had a bad crop, they didn't lose any money or energy. And I was willing to. So where we are today is, how can we produce a story like the bean?
Right.
How do we get it out there where it's like supporting sustainability? And sure, everything is changing. We know that. We need to use our seas, our oceans, like I learned in Japan. If you watch The Magic of a Dish, the PBS bought it last year, and it was in every state in America in August, a bunch of nights, kind of hard to find. But you'll see us up there working with seaweed. Now, we own more land on the outside of the United States than we do dry land, but we don't use it. So a prospect like kombu or growing sea vegetables is another issue that could be great for us. And we just have to, get the people to work with him. But when you read Eat Like a Fish, you'll see that he's done extremely well. And you also look at how many products are already developed from kombu and how it's everywhere already. But us chefs have to learn how to get it more on the table. And that's one of the biggest parts of Japanese diet, dashi, which is made from kombu. And then I'll just close by saying one other thing is that I started bringing a lot of products back from Japan. And one of them is called kudzu. We call it kudzu here. It was brought here before the cherry blossoms by the Japanese. It's from the sweet pea family. It's not indigenous here. It's extremely prolific. It's a vine that goes in and out of the ground. So it brings nitrogen because it's in the air and it goes in the ground. The government put it everywhere because it would hold rivers from losing the land, right? Now, I've been using it for like 25 years. I do everything with kudzu, and there's nothing I haven't been able to do. So we're talking pastry, base, everything. I use it like flour. I dust my scallops today, and I put in kudzu with some matcha tea, and it was unbelievable. So one of our last events, before we closed for COVID, we had a bunch of bankers, and they wanted me to talk about, food for supporting sugar. So I did, and I sent the first course. I sent the second course because the test kitchen, the big event space was open. And then I got to go do the third course. So I started to go back to the kitchen. One man weighs me over. Let me tell you something. When I sat down, I was 198. You brought me down 34 points in the first course. You brought me 30 points in the second course. His wife says, usually after 3 or 4 tastes of food, we have to give him insulin. I said, well, this is unbelievable. You told me you have the constant glucose monitor on. Could you show them? And here's my mic. Please stand up and share this. And he stood up and he shared with everyone. And boy, did he have attention. And many people went to talk to him on the way out because the constant glucose monitor, I believe, is the future of getting better health. We call them the wearables. It could be the Oura Ring, the Whoop Ring, whatever. These are extremely powerful instruments that don't cost much, that we can learn about our sleep. We can learn about our body temperature. We can learn all these things. How do we communicate that to the chefs? How do we work with this knowledge? Where are we in terms of a chef learning to use that information that a lot of folks are getting from their wearables or studying even their genes or their ancestry? How do chefs get educated to really contribute to these people's both joy of food and health contributions? So that's kind of where I think we've been learning from Japan, because they don't have the gulfs that we have to cross. They are so homogenized in terms of, we do have it here, of course. You've got some great support at the university there. Cornell, we have University of Connecticut. These are agricultural universities, but I see the future as a chef to understand what kind of food can I produce for you? Like I helped this editor who's saying she can't sleep. So I put her on a GABA diet and she calmed down. And she says now she's sleeping through. And she's wearing Oura Ring. So we see that her body temperature is too high. So that's either a cold or stress. It should be lower than your normal temperature. So the wearables are very interesting information. If we could sit with other folks, get the data, the algorithms, and we can compile this, we can develop amazing recipes that will support people in their very busy lifestyle or the lifestyle that's making the imbalances that probably they won't change, but food will help them once we work together. So that's what I learned from Japan, how a biochemist, a doctor, a farmer, a fish person, they're often sitting together. I couldn't believe how often I would go into a room and I was just with that guy yesterday. We were out at sea picking up kombu. What are you doing here? And they're all working together. The data that the fisherman is bringing to the table is so interesting for the biochemist and the doctors. And why the Okinawans started to fall behind in their longevity is because they stopped eating so much seaweed. They realized that their tonnage of kombu had decreased over the last 3 or 4 years. And they think that other reasons are possibly there, but the Nagano folks are now the greatest per capita for over 100 years old, the blue zone. So, I think if we all work together like this, it'd be really outstanding what we could, your knowledge, what you've contributed, you have all those beautiful things that I saw there, but isn't it just as important where they sit and the environment they live in, how they grow, and what are they vulnerable, where are they vulnerable in our future? Can we make those adjustments? The natural evolution is going to happen. It's been happening for a million years. Pollination is going to continue to happen like it always has. So how do we study this and become a member of that evolution? And with the knowledge that we all have, I think the only way is by putting many heads together. We do it here regularly. Once a week, we have a dinner called Talking Heads. I just bring in people like you, like Janos. I'll bring a doctor. I'll bring some fishermen from Nova Scotia or something. What are you seeing out there? I'll make a long dinner and we just share everything that we see and hopefully come up with some solutions. And it's been fascinating through COVID because we'll get together and we'll do it virtually, but now we're sitting together. So yeah, the teamwork, the unified efforts, the passion, and the celebration. We've got to celebrate. And finally, we need measure. We need to have a measuring tool. So all of us are doing great things, but where is our measuring tool? How do we measure our efforts, our energy? We all need to develop stronger measuring tools so we know that we're on track, that we're having an impact, we're getting traction. And that tool is just as important as how hard we work or how much we think about changing things. We need to be quantifying our efforts with some tool of measure. So, and I found those guys. And so, I'll find, who can help me with that? So it's basically, I'm lucky I'm in a place like New York, so I can find a lot of minds. But today with Zoom, you're in Arizona, I'm sitting here on Harrison Street, and we're having a good time talking about these issues that are so important. And I don't think this is the end. I really think that I want to become more involved in what you folks are doing in your efforts and connect some of the partners we have with yours. And hopefully we're going to have a lot more fun. I talked too much again, didn't I?
It's great though, but David, embedded in what you said were so many powerful models, the incentivization that the restaurant industry can do by taking a chance on unproven products, species, ingredients, right? The transdisciplinary merging of minds that we need to break out of the logjam. Dad, there's so much there. Just take this and wherever you want to pick up.
Yeah. So, David, it's always inspiring to talk with you and listen to you. And those pieces are so important, and how we remain open, because I think the paradigm for you and I and for chefs is changing. And particularly as we get older and can change our model and what we've been doing in our lives and take a larger perspective, that gives us an opportunity to do a lot more. And so what our focus in years past was, every customer, every time has to be perfect. And that's what it was all about. And that's how we took that's how we measured our success. Well, I think success becomes measured in different ways. And I don't know what the metrics are for that, but it involves, how do we impact the smaller and the larger community around us? What are the things that are important in those communities? How do we impact that? How do we bring together the teams that do that, which you're doing so well, because, and there's no shortage of bright minds around.
Mm-hmm.
The light bulb has to go on for folks. They have to go on for me. They have to go on for you, Ben. They go on for you, David. And for the bright minds to see that they can actually make a difference, and to see and to approach the issues that are out there with a certain amount of optimism, that there is hope. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of positive things that can come from it, and to bring a joy to that, which you obviously bring to your work, David, and I certainly try to bring to mine as well, because without that piece, the optimism and the joy, well, there goes motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're to be motivated by doing good things, but then intrinsically in their very doing, bring you pleasure and help other people. That's sort of the key to it, and where you have boundless energy to do all of those.
Well, it's interesting, what you're saying there, because the excitement, one person said to me, which was a light bulb, because you and I were talking through COVID, and you told me what you're doing, and I said, everything you said, if you typed it, just change the name on the top, put David Boule up there, because I just did what you just did. But, one of the things that I realized is the consumer wants change. And, that's a great measure. I was in France in a factory in Brittany, because I'm working with some companies over there. They're all BO. It's amazing what they've been doing. 125-year-old company. They own a bunch of things. They make the barat butter. They do all these beautiful things. And the chairman was showing me at the end that he had the sort of plastic yogurt cup, the glass one, and then they had one with recycled brown paper and wax. And he said to me, the people are buying the one with the wax and the brown paper. That cost me more than the glass or the plastic, but they're buying it, and they're not buying the plastic. Some are buying glass, but they've shifted to the recycled paper and wax. They believe that's better. That night we're having dinner with a lot of retailers that were there, big companies, and they were telling me, you should see the sales drop in the plastic bottles. We don't sell so many plastic bottles anymore. It's been going down so quickly in the last 14 months, 18 months. Maybe France has a little bit more passion about the sea with Jacques Cousteau and everything else, but I don't know. I mean, when the consumer who's in the driver's seat realizes they are, there's an incredible amount of change that can happen. And so when I came back, I consulted a few businesses. One was pretty big, and I was telling them these statistics, and they were really surprised. So already in the last, that was about 7 months ago, I already see that they're investing in some alternatives as well. I don't know the response yet, but I believe that the consumer knows that plastic is bad, particularly younger kids. It's amazing how they want to help clear that up. So, that would be just one sort of concept. And then when we get to food, when we grew the fingerling, it was really difficult for us. we had to bring in seaweed from Norway. We had to mineralize our grounds to get it really active. It's still active today. The couple got divorced, and Rick always tells me, yeah, my wife got my soil. You know, it's like, what do you mean my wife got my soil? You have a huge farm. My wife has my soil. I put all that, you know. So how do we, you know, he went through this, he studied what he needed to do, and he put about, I don't know, 8 or 9 vegetables that are commonplace today on the market. And he had to learn how to develop success on each one. Some of the things that we did learn in Japan is also that every single meal has a abundance of fermented foods. So I'll ask some people, like friends, when's the last time you had some fermented foods? And you know, they have no idea. Maybe they'll mention yogurt. I'll talk a little bit more about what's the yogurt they ate. And I'll ask them, well, can you find out how much sugar was in there? And so, you know, it's 28, 30 grams, 40 grams of sugar. Well, the yogurt bacteria needs to be between 5 and 10 grams of sugar to feed the bacteria to stay alive. But over that, we don't really need to have sugar in there. So how did we work with the natural production of what our palates draw us to, which is one could be sugar. We mentioned that a few minutes ago, like levain, bread. My sister and brother are celiac. I am not, but I cannot eat anything that is not organic flour and not with levain, natural production of bacteria. Our baker in France educated me on this when I opened Boule Bakery in '98. He's 11 generations of baking. No son has taken a break. And so every time we would develop the mother, I thought it was relatively new. So he was helping the same company that I work with 3 years ago, and he came back and he told me, do you remember when I went up there, when I first started helping you, I helped them too? Well, they told me that their miche bread is still the same bacteria that you brought us here in '98. I said, wow, that's amazing, Jacques, that's so cool. Then he looks at me and goes, that's my grandfather's bacteria. So he's 71. So how old is that bacteria? It's 100 and something years old. And this guy up in Mystic, Connecticut is making his own miso and soy sauce. He's never been to Japan, doesn't even Japanese restaurants, fell in love with bacteria. And he's got a bakery, and you know, keep the cash flow. He figured out bakery don't make much money. Let's do pizza too. So he's making pizza with levain dough. I love it so much. I bought it in. He shipped to me yesterday. I made it last night for my wife. It was unbelievable. I didn't have any issue with that. So how do we address, you know, how do we sort of supplement where people are with foods by introducing new foods? I always say, don't try to break a bad habit. Let's make a new habit. You know, it's too hard to break. Let's make a new habit.
Well, picking up on that piece, just to, you know, on the fermented.
Picking up, I'll wander off here.
No, well, on the fermented piece, there's a lot of work happening here right now in partnerships with Mexico, led by Gary Nabhan, about fermented beverages in Mexico and the diversity of fermented beverages from pulque, but that's just the tip of the iceberg with agave, but to much, much more. And thinking about a new habit, tepache is another example, but again, these are just skimming the surface, and they're delicious.
Well, I think we mentioned kombucha because we had this counter restaurant called Boule at home up to COVID, and I talked to a lot of folks. There were some folks from Harvard who were telling me that the SKU at Whole Foods, the most popular SKU was kombucha about 4 or 5 years ago. And I don't know if we spoke about it either, because I had to do a podcast a couple minutes ago with a Japanese nutritionalist in Tokyo, and I can't remember if I said the same thing, but I would go into stores and I see the young people buying kombucha, and I walk up to them and I say, why are you buying that? And they say, I said, well, I'm a chef. I'm just, just curious. And they say, I don't know, it just makes me feel good. And I said, well, what do you mean? And well, I don't like the coffee, but the sweet stuff, I need to work. I'm in tech. I'm a tech guy and I need to stay awake. And the kombucha helps me and I feel good in my stomach. So, how do we go? I said to myself, wow, 15 years ago, if you put a Coke or a bottle of kombucha, which one would they have taken? And I think we don't have to think too far about that. So how do we guide this with folks like you, with your knowledge there? And how do we, transport a habit into a different habit where no one even knows they changed to have it. The fellow that I buy my tea from, that was it last night, was in Mexico City 2 days ago. And he was reporting to me because, you know, he does a lot of teas and he's getting into some fermentation. His wife is Japanese. They have the first matcha roller in America. We're toasting Hochi Cha last night that I'm gonna smoke duck tomorrow. And we started talking about fermentation. And he was at some place at a market where he said, there are so many kinds of things together in some kind of paste. I don't know what it was, but I just pointed at something because I don't speak Spanish, and I ate it. And he goes to Japan like constantly because he has to buy his tea. And he knew it was fermented. And he said, wow, you know, you should have seen this place. And they just put on a taco and I ate it. It was so good. And it was kind of like a miso, but it wasn't. But if you look around the world where they have the highest temperature, kind of like where you are, they always have a paste. The Mexicans call it, what do we call it in Mexico? You know, the 47, the paste that, oh, you know what it is. Anyways.
Talking about moles?
Yeah, yeah, mole. And then in Thailand, I used to spend a lot of time there. We have the Thai curry paste. In Japan, we have miso. You know, these pastes, I've always been there to energize the cooking, but to stabilize the bacteria as well, because they're just loaded with antibacterial components. And in fact, we have Nuka here from Nagasaki. And if you're familiar with Nuka, it's the brown paste, the outside of the rice. And this one is certified 200 years old. So you put a cucumber in there and tomorrow you take it out and the bacteria drank all the water, and you slice that crisp cucumber without salt and sugar and you say, wow, that's amazing. I don't have to put salt and sugar. That costs a lot of money too. But if I can put it in a bacteria environment, I can put a whole fish in there. I can put carrots and the best pickles you ever had. So that would be another example. In fact, when I was with Bruno in France in May, he's been watching some of the things that we did in Japan. And, you know, xanthan gum. So xanthan is a emulsifier. It's in a lot of different drinks and things, but and that one we can't metabolize, so it goes out of our body anyways. That's why the EU allows it. But it's basically a bacteria from sugar and a fat, and we have this bacteria, so we can emulsify things. So not long ago, I'm doing a dinner with another group, and I'm holding the bowling pin ball of almond milk. And I'm saying, the business machine is on our team. Look what they did to develop an alternative dairy for people that have a problem with dairy. Oh, but let me read all the, and a lot of my customers say they have problems breathing and have phlegm there. So, and then I pick up my right hand and I have like 6 boxes here. And I say, look at this one, Malk, M-A-L-K. Let me read you this one. Sprouted organic almonds, Himalayan salt, purified water. That's it. Some of my friends in the retail business didn't believe when I first saw that at a health store, so I had to send them a case because they were wondering, how does that stay on the shelf? But we make almond milk since the last 30 years, but we don't use water. We use mineral water, not flat water, because the mineral water pulls out the benefits and gives a better taste. That would be an example. Someone might try to make the almond milk and they thought it was flat. Well, if they tried it with a bottle of mineral water, they would find so much more flavor because salt was an extraction and it would have produced something special. And they wouldn't have to buy something with all these gums and stabilizers. So that would be an example when the business machine starts on this evolution. They went to alternatives for dairy, and now here's this milk. And they have cashew, they have pecan, they have almond, only the nut, Himalayan salt, water in each one. So if they're able to do it, and they're probably pretty smart, there's somebody in business saying, hey, the profits are a little bit better on this one. They're selling at the same price. The other folks got to put all these other staples on it to make it look like milk. All you got to do is shake this for a second. It's beautiful. So those are some of the things that we want people to understand. There was a client that had an issue with this milk. That's how I learned that a lot of people were having problems with all the collagens and the stabilizers. So we realized, gee, here's a recipe. Why don't you try this? And then all his problems went away in about 4 months because he thought he was eating really healthy. I'm eating almond milk. Yeah, but yeah. So this is the purpose of getting together and sharing this knowledge, education.
So on a related health note, and this is not unique to the Southwest, unfortunately, one of the major health crises we have, especially in underrepresented communities, especially among our indigenous communities, is diabetes, and the change in diet. You know, a shift away from a desert diet of very, healthy and in step with the region ingredients to high fat content, high sugar, everything opposite. I know both of you have invested in this, and David, some of the stuff you may have said already, but very tangibly, specifically, what are ways that we can help at a local level or in communication or in the foods we present or in the garden we're creating at the base of our hill here in Tucson that are tangible lessons or practices that people can use to help address, such a problem of diabetes. Either, Dad, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, because I think that piece is, to me, shouldn't be a difficult one. If what we need to do is teach people that healthy food can taste great. And so when you go back and the research I've done in native foods and how they're prepared, that in truth, a lot of people didn't know how to cook. And so the native foods, when it didn't necessarily taste good. So if you're doing choya buds and you don't know how to prepare them, or you're doing any of the beans, and if you don't know how to cook well and season properly and take care of the ingredients, it's not going to taste good. And it does take some work. And so, but if you can teach people that it's not difficult to cook food that's healthy, that those foods are in abundance and they're often inexpensive, and that they can enjoy making them, then that's how you can change that. But as long as it's easier to drop into a fast food joint and get a burger and fries, you've got to change all of that. So one, you have to change it on the individual level of how they shop, how they cook, how they prepare food that tastes good, is going to nourish them and they're going to enjoy. But I've long thought that you also need to have and make inroads into these big multinationals who take the easy way out and don't really care about the health of their customers, and just figure there's going to be another generation behind them. But there ought to be ways, I've always felt, to be able to profit even in the fast food business by serving fast, healthy food, and inexpensively so. So both of those, to me, are on the individual level and more on the larger level, working with those large companies to develop the products that they can actually sell and make money on, that when their customers eat them, they're going to live a lot longer and feel a lot better and not clog up the health system.
Well, those are all good points. And I do see the business machine realizing that they're leaving a lot of money on the table, that those folks that are coming up through with foods at any price range or any convenience of use are contributing to a nutritional value, are going to make a fortune. And we're starting to see that now. And the consumer, we're starting to see it. I go into health food stores all this time. And I work with a company up here called Wegmans, and a family-run company, 106 years old. And their values are right on pin. It's unbelievable where and how they want to be able to sell healthy meals, not just sell food. They want to sell healthy meal programs because they know what you just said. A lot of people don't have the time. They don't have the skill. They think, I have this one guy up in my house up in the Berkshires there, a landscaper was telling me the other day, really nice guy. I said, do you want me to take home this piece of grass-fed organic diet beef? The guy that grows it, he grows yams and sweet potatoes to feed his steer. He doesn't buy any food that goes on that farm. He produces all the food for his 300 head. Try this. He goes, I wouldn't know what to do with that. I said, well, don't you eat hot food? No, I eat at my mother's house every day. So he's in the 50s and she's, whatever age she is, she's loved to cook. But so there's a lot of people that made an adjustment where they'll never cook. So the convenience store is still for them. Right. So I guess if we departmentalize the different walks of life and try to understand what are the possibilities, how do we work together? I see a lot of that happening, particularly now. Like this bean, the white bean, the tempura bean that I bought out there when I was there.
The temporary beans, yeah.
Yeah, I still have a few bags left.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah. So on the counter, honest, we hear everything, so it's like a sushi bar. And for us, you and I, all these years, we had a wall between our kitchen and dining room. So we don't see the eyebrows. We don't see any of that like the sous chef. We can look over there and he guides his cooking by how they're responding to his food, And so this guy said to his wife, honey, did you try that bean? And they just come back from Tuscany. And they go to Spain, have a house in San Sebastian. So they know what beans are. And he said, wow, this is the best bean I ever had in my life. And I didn't really do anything to it. I noticed I followed the instructions on the bag 100%. You had to soak it for a while, then you cook it at a certain percentage of water. Then I've never done a bean like that. I followed the instructions, it worked perfectly. So I guess the other part of this too is how do we get folks to maybe contribute 2 hours a week in their kitchen to build a inventory of building blocks of which they could execute. But we started this with, issues of diabetes. And diabetes is a global issue. It's really amazing how countries like China and India are dealing with it. Whereas 150, 160 years ago, they didn't know what diabetes was. But then they start to polish the rice and they start polishing the rice down to such a point where they took off most of the nutrients and ended up with sugar. And since 150, 160 years of the popularity of polished white rice, diabetes has arrived. So where is it that we've turned our food? And that's a major example. Billions of people. There's a woman at the embassy not long ago from India said they're trying to get the integrating brown rice because they have to get away from the white rice. So what do we do to our food? How do we build, to answer your question, we need more fiber. We need fiber they like. We need them to understand what is soluble, insoluble fiber. We need for them to understand what is berberine, what is bitter melon. Are you familiar with those vegetables? Those are extremely, pardon?
Go on.
Yeah, these are extremely good for diabetes. They help maintain our shovel. But, I really feel like we have to educate folks, maybe in a community. Maybe we should put some money together and buy 100 wearables so people can wear a constant glucose monitor and they can start to become part of the team. And it can be a hobby for them. It could be like fun. Wow, look what I did today. I didn't get a spike at all in my constant glucose monitor. I'm learning to eat this and the other thing. So maybe the wearables could help us.
So Dave, I'm curious if you know of a woman, Dr. Esther Sternberg here at the University of Arizona.
Yeah, I only know the name because
I think that's exactly where she's going and the opportunity to learn from wearables and then also thinking about here on Tumamoc Hill, trying to use, hiking this mountain and how talking about metrics, right? What does it mean to your daily lives and your livelihood over time of that continued exercise and eating well? I think there's so many incredible opportunities for both outreach and working and interventions and collaborations with the community, but then studies that can be those metrics to address that.
I'm sure in your storage houses that I saw, you have an incredible amount of quality fiber there, I would think.
And native seeds, absolutely.
And you need certain compounds or fats to bind. So if we don't eat it in a proper designed or engineered, the bioavailability or the function is not as efficient. So how do we produce? A lot of people are so afraid from fats since Dr. Keyes changed the world. And this woman named Nina, she did the big fat surprise. She's done a couple with us. Canadian Congress had her demonstrate her facts for 2 hours, in Canada. They're not going to invite her down to Washington and talk about how we had an issue with fats and we went to salt and sugars and we have this problem now. We should be eating healthy fats. So a lot of people don't understand that you need fat. You need good fat. And fat has such a function as a binder. You need other kinds of compounds, but I think you have it all in those storage bins and in those beautiful places. Has folks at the university studied some of the quality of the fiber that you have in those beans or other things that might introduce a intervention for diabetes? I'm sure you are having those kinds of testing.
And we need to have more of them, I think.
Yeah, you have an incredibly beautiful inventory of foods in there.
And leveraging that in, so that really, when we think about next steps, is taking that inventory in a variety of different ways. One is scalability. Two is really doing the work and leveraging that inventory in ways that can be healthy, rather than, we can't just let them sit on the shelf and say, boy, we've collected all of these things.
Exactly.
What's the next step to leverage them towards the future?
Right. How do we integrate them so they bring muscle to our health challenges, and also from the ground up? I mean, like you spoke, it's possible that it could be like Afghanistan at one day. These certain things like the mushroom kingdom is going to live forever. I think it was the first bacteria is going to be the last. So what has been the evolution in the last 50 years? Because there's already enough data there to apply it to the next 50, although things might be changing faster. From an agricultural point, that's not something I'm spending a lot of time on. We do a talking heads with a bunch of farmers I know who all have degrees, particularly since this relationship with UConn. But I'm just trying to figure out how did our bodies get out of balance like this? I mean, there's a lot of blatant information, of course, that we know that fast food is a great contributor, and many other things where, we're finally realizing how much sugar is in something. But does anyone understand how to calculate the carbohydrates? And what are the carbohydrates? Maybe people will find, oh, it's too much sugar. But the carbohydrates could be just as detrimental. So we have to educate them to read what is a high level of carbohydrates, which is going to probably transform into a glucose, and they're going to have a problem with sugar. All right. So how do we, it's all on education. And that's why I think, that's why I want to get out of the restaurant business, because a lot of people like you and Ben, these are all dots on a matrix that we have to connect. And I think that when we do connect, we all know enough people that would love to invest in the future. Some guy the other day that was telling me, Dave, I did really well in finance, and my family's all set, and I really want to make some kind of investment to make their future better. So I think we need to get something where it's a clear program. What is the program? What's our agenda? How do we establish a program? And how we all work together? It's not just happening here, because when I go to France, I see a little bit like in Japan, a lot of different minds are together. They sharing evidence that they see in the changing world. You and I, when we were cooking 30 years ago, we had to do certain kinds of cooking for senior citizens, right? Today, it's a 5 or 8 or 12-year-old that I'm spending more time with than a senior citizen. It's amazing the change as a chef, how we had to learn all these different things that these younger people cannot appreciate in our restaurant.
Oh, we lost him. His connection lost. Well, there was no good way to pause that, so maybe that was as good as any, because we could honestly continue this conversation for another hour and a half. I wish so much that we could go and continue this over a glass of wine and at dinner. I know we will. I view this as part one until we can get David back out here and to continue the conversation, or all of us take a new field trip to New York. I don't know which we can do first.
Let's do both.
I like it. Dad, thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. This has been really fun, and you connected me to David's cooking, and so it's great to be able to close this circle with you. So thank you.
Yeah, Ben, thanks so much. And this is, and David, if you're able to hear us, I don't know if you are, you've been absolutely terrific and enlightening, and what a pleasure, and we'll continue this for many years into the future, I know.
To everyone that joined us, thank you so much for being along for this. I learned a lot in this lecture series, and that's one of the selfish inspirations is, okay, what can we learn from? Where do I want to learn? And I've just really appreciated all of our guests. Thank you to the Friends of Tumamoc for your support in making this series happen. To all of you, have a really wonderful, healthy, tasty, delicious, safe, and healthy holidays. And we'll see you in 2022. And we'll toast to you until then. So good night. Thank you.